Hey guys, it's Z. Coming back at you with another 20 cards that I recommend you look at considering picking up for Commander, all of which under $10 at the time of recording. So, for our first card here, we're kind of just going to jump right into it. We're looking at red today. So, in this case for red, the first card we're kind of looking at is going to be a little bit one of our archetype pieces in the form of Gutter Snipe. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe deals 2 damage to each opponent. So, in a deck that wants to cast a bunch of spells or a bunch of cantrips, things of that nature, Gutter Snipe is going to reduce the clock to win the game significantly. If I cast 5 just 1 mana spells in the turn with a Gutter Snipe on the field, that's already 10 points of damage to each of my opponents. A total of 30 points of damage across this table most of the time. Assuming you're playing in a 4-man pod. With that, this card at 3 mana gets so much inherent value that realistically, its price is probably a little bit overlooked. It's one of those cards that you should be considering in these decks. That said, it's not really so much underrated as much as more so it's just been reprinted and people have them. So if you don't, I would consider adding it to your collection. It's very affordable. Our next card is fairly new from the Adventures in Forgotten Realms. This is going to be a haste enabler, specifically for commanders and things like that nature. So we're looking at Boots of Speed. It's a 1 mana red equip artifact. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 in haste. And it's only 1 to equip. So, in this case, it's very, very affordable to be able to equip, attach, and go. It's going to allow us to get our creatures to attack much faster, and it's even got a little bit of a power bonus to buff, or to boot. So, yeah, I see what I did there. That said, it's a card that's pretty useful and pretty nice to have around. So, next card we're going to be looking at is more of a board wipe style effect for red. So, red doesn't get a lot of destroy creatures, they get a lot of dealing damage to creatures. So the card we're going to be looking at here is going to be Magma Quake. It's X red, instant. Magma Quake deals X damage to each creature without flying in each planeswalker. So notably if you're playing something like a dragon deck or you're playing against an angel deck or something, just keep in mind it doesn't hit those flyers. So just something to keep in mind, but otherwise it will help clear the board out, get some of the low-level soldiers or other small little threats out of the way, so you can kind of clear the board and reset. Next card we're looking at is along the same lines, really. It's another, we'll call it a board wipe. It's not so much a board wipe with red, but that's what they tend to be. So, Chain Reaction, 2 red, Sorcery. Chain Reaction deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So if there are 5 creatures on the battlefield, every creature takes 5. If there are 25 creatures on the battlefield, every creature is going to take 25. And so with that, it's a very, very good board wipe that kind of scales based on the progression of the game. Normally, by the time there are 6 or 7 creatures on the board, it's probably about time for a Wrath anyway, and that's going to be big enough to kill most creatures. Along the same lines, our next spell is also another board wipe for red. This is going to be Comet Storm. X red. Instant with multi-kicker 1. Choose target creature or player, then choose another target or creature or player for each time Comet Storm was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. So, it's not as fancy, it's not as over the top as like the Magma Quake or the Chain Reaction, but it's another solid effect to help clear off the board and get some of the small things out of the way. The next card we're going to be looking at is another newie but goodie from AFR, Adventures from Forgotten Realms, in the form of Unexpected Windfall. It's an instant. As an additional cost to cast, discard a card. However, you do get to draw 2 and create 2 treasures. with Treasure Synergy kind of starting to float around in the format, it's got that extra inherent value. And if you look at just the 2 treasure tokens as mana reduction here on this particular spell, realistically you're only paying 2 mana for discard, draw 2, which is about the going rate. So it just, I think it's a little bit better than some of the other effects there you could have. I think it's about on par with things like Thirster. It's on par with other effects, I should say. So just something to think about. The next one we have is going to be Young Pyromancer. Much like we talked about Gutter Snipe before, this is going to be the version that instead of making everyone take some damage, you're going to get some creatures to play defense or to attack an opponent with. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get to put a 1/1 red elemental creature token into the battlefield. So if you've got other effects like Impact Tremors or Warstorm Surge, those creatures will enter, they'll deal damage, and then they can still attack the next turn if they need to. Things like that. So basically the same kind of decks that are going to want a Gutter Snipe are going to want the Young Pyromancer. They're going to just kind of want to accumulate board state and protect themselves or be aggressive. Speaking of be aggressive, the next card we're looking at here is going to be Chandra Flamecaller. 6 mana for a 4 loyalty Chandra Planeswalker. The uptick for +1 is she can put 2 3/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste onto the battlefield, but you will have to exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So realistically, they're coming in to attack something or somebody. But if they happen to take down some creatures along the way, that's not a big deal. It's kind of what they're going to be there for, is just some fodder to get some value. She has a 0 ability to discard all the cards in your hand. Then you get to draw that many +1. So you do actually get to go +1 on this effect here, rather than just pitch 5, draw 4, pitch 5, draw 5. You actually get to go up to 6 for that example. So it's not bad. And then it's got a -X where Chandra Flamecaller deals X to each creature. So again, it's another board wipe effect, but it's variable based on what you need it to be. So if you've got a thing that's a 5/5, but your opponent's largest creature is a 3, you just down take for 3, burn all the 3s out, and swing him with the 5. So it's that versatility there is what makes it pretty good. On top of that, in a pinch, you can always just burst fire it and save your board. Or save yourself. The next card we're going to talk about is, if you play Modern, you're probably familiar with this before its banning. That's going to be Faithless Looting. Sorcery, 1 red mana, draw 2, then discard 2. But it can flash back for 3 mana. So, in a way, this is Red's version of card draw. Along the same lines, this is more a card selection. But because the graveyard is such a resource in Commander, this also allows you to be able to fuel that graveyard. Oh, hey, maybe I want this artifact there. Well, I'm going to pitch it with my Faithless Looting. So, just something to keep in mind, something you'll be able to work around and make happen there. So, the next card on our list is going to be Mana Geyser. So, Mana Geyser says 5 mana, sorcery speed, add 1 red mana to your mana pool for each tap mana your opponent's, or each tap land your opponents control. So, the nice thing about this is generally by the time you're casting it, you're probably on 4 or 5. Which means if everyone else is taken to trying to further their board state or game state, they're going to be tapping down their lands and playing cards. Let's say it's a 3-person pod. We're on turn 5. We'll just say, for ease of use, each player of our 3 opponents has used 4 of their mana. That nets you 7 additional mana on top of the 5 you spent to cast the Mana Geyser. So because you're at 7 additional mana, that may be a Hellkite Iron. That might be another big dragon. That could be some other big nasty game ender. But it's one of those, at large burst, allows you to kind of swing or add more momentum to your game and try to jump in a little bit faster. The next card on our list is going to be another sacrifice outlet, much like we discussed before in our series, in the form of Goblin Bombardment. So, sacrifice a creature, Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Now, those don't sound like great rates, but if your creatures are going to die anyway, you might as well get some extra value. Board wipe going off and you've got a Goblin Bombardment on field? Well, I might as well sack all my creatures to the Goblin Bombardment, hit you for 12 points of damage, and, at least get my value out of them that way. They're still going in the graveyard all the same, so it doesn't make a difference. So, our next card is going to be Dictate of the Twin Gods. Red has this lovely little affinity with modifying damage, is how I'll phrase it. Whether that's doubling damage, adding additional damage, things like that. Dictate of the Twin Gods is a enchantment with flash, so you can flash it in during your opponent's turn while they're getting attacked by another opponent, or they're doing something else. If a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. Very simple, very straightforward. It does go both ways. So, if you put this in, somebody else gets hit for double, don't be surprised when they hit you with their board and that board hits you for double what it would normally be dealing. So, just be careful about that and kind of pay attention to the board state, because otherwise that might come back to bite you. The next card we're going to be looking at is going to be Storm, Kill, and Artist. It gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. And that's good, but that's not really what we're looking at with this card. Instead, we're looking at the Magecraft trigger on this 4-mana 2/2. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. So for us, what that's going to mean is, hey, I cast this cantrip. That cantrip is free because we're getting that mana back in the form of a treasure. So, very good card. And it's in the same types of decks that want these gutter snipes, that want these young pyromancers, these type of effects. Storm Killing is great. Storm Killing, though, does also have that cross versatility into the artifact decks, where it's going to get more powerful the more artifacts you have on board. So, in theory, it could be a 25-2 swinging in on people, just because you've got so many artifacts in play. So one of Red's specialties is destroying artifacts. They love artifacts, but they hate them. That's just sometimes how invention goes. However, with that invention, our next card is going to be Vandalblast. So 1 red sorcery, destroy target artifact you don't control. But there's a little bit more to it than that. It's got the ability Overload for 4 in a red. And what that'll do is it'll change the spell to read, destroy each artifact you don't control. So basically what that does is it just replaces the word. So in practical terms, what that means is it's 1 red mana, get rid of an artifact you don't want to see. Singular. Pay 5 red mana, get rid of everyone else's artifacts. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Just blow them up. So, in a lot of ways, that's a very good thing you can do just to play the politics of it. Or let's say an opponent's playing an artifact deck and they're starting to go a little bit out of control. It's a way to rein them real quick back in. So, while I would never recommend Reserve List on a budget video, just because it's not feasible, Reserve List is finite, we can recommend Reserve List alternatives. In this case, I've got Wheel of Misfortune. The way this card works, rather than recommending you something that's on Reserve List or hyper expensive, this is going to be our budget alternative. So the way it works is every player, upon the spell resolving, will select a number and keep it secret from everyone else at the table. Once the numbers are selected, everyone will at the same time reveal the number to the table. Once the numbers are revealed, you determine who has the highest number and the lowest number. Whoever has the lowest number will not wheel, will not take any damage, will not have any effect from this spell. The person with the highest number will take the damage, but will have the ability to take the wheel as well. Every other player, aside from the player with the lowest, will take the wheel. So, in this case, if you're using this as a draw spell and you need to guarantee yourself a draw, as long as your life total is above 0 by the time this spell resolves, so you can choose to pay 39 out of your 40, you can technically do that. As long as you're not the lowest number, you'll get to wheel. Generally, in my experience, somebody who does want to be the lowest number will just pick 0 and guarantee their hand, versus the other players that might want to fight for it a little bit, but generally I see 1 to 3 being about the range people are willing to pay for the Wheel of Misfortune. So I have seen other people go all in with, like, I'll take 37, let's go. But realistically, it's just once you get to know the people you play with, you'll get to know how to play that card a little bit better. But I do like its capability for just being able to automatically refill your hand and keep the game moving along. So, after that, our next card is going to be Blasphemous Act. This card has been kept fairly affordable due to a lot of reprints. But basically, it's a 9 mana cost sorcery. That mana cost is a little bit deceptive, though. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. Not just yours, just total overall on the battlefield. And when it goes off, it deals 13 points of damage to each creature. So, in this case, it's hypothetically a 1 mana board wipe. And if you can get it to go off for 1 mana, and then reset the board first, especially since you're in red, you have a lot of haste, you can get the extra value out of that card versus some of the other decks that may run it, but they don't run as many haste enablers or things like that. The next card we're looking at is going to be Chaos Warp. Chaos Warp's a fun little card here. It also happens to be one of Red's only ways to deal with an enchantment in its actual colors. So it's a 3 mana instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into his or her library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent, he or she puts it on the battlefield. So, what this means for us here is, basically, I don't want your, we'll just say Strip Mine. I'll make Strip Mine go away with Chaos Warp. You shuffle that Strip Mine into your deck, and then once your deck is shuffled, you'll reveal the top card. On that, if that top card is a permanent, it doesn't matter what it is, it comes into play automatically. So, you could spin them from something bad to something worse, but you could also spin them from, hey, this is a game-ending nasty threat, down to, oh, you can have a basic land, thank you for your time, and just keep it moving along. So with that, it is a little bit of a chaos card, but with that being said, it's just a way that can kind of help you save yourself. Now, of note, the thing you can do with this is you can also use it on your own stuff to see if you can cheat into something bigger. For example, let's say you're running a commander like Mael the Anima, who cares about big, powerful creatures. And you've got a small little mana dork that with an enter the battlefield ability. You can Chaos Warp your own mana dork, shuffle it back into the deck. So worst case scenario, if you hit that mana dork again, well, you get its ability again. But best case, you turn it into a big monster that you can just swing into things. And so Chaos Warp has a couple of applications in that regard as well. It's a pretty fun card. I recommend it, and I like it because it is one of the Red's signature type of removals. It's very chaotic, and it can get rid of that enchantment, versus most red cards can't. So, that being said, moving on, our next card is going to be probably one of my favorite equipment that's in a specific color scheme. I know it ravaged Standard for a little bit as well, but I'm just going to ask you one question. Do you believe in the Cleave? Because I believe in Ember Cleave. Ember Cleave is a legendary artifact equipment with Flash for 6 mana. This spell costs 1 last to cast for each attacking creature you control. When it enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. An equipped creature gets +1/+1, double strike, and trample. At the time of recording, the app or website I'm using has it at $7.50. So, It is within our budget. Shockingly, I actually would have expected a little bit more, but this card, yeah, it's a very, very good way to give double strike or to give trample to creatures. And if you're running a commander-centric deck that wants to kill people with commander damage, this changes the math dramatically on how you're going to get there. Commander damages count to 21. Well, with double strike and trample, this is going to help you get there a lot faster. It makes trades a lot less favorable, and realistically, it's one of those. It's just you don't really seem to win when you're on the wrong end of an Ember Cleave. So the next card we're going to be looking at here is Hellkite Iron. I wanted to have some kind of alternative win con card here that also had practical application. Hellkite Iron just felt right for that. So it is a 6 mana, 6/5 flying trampler. When it deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. So with that, oh hey, artifact player, I'm stealing all your cards. They're all mine now. But its alternative win condition part comes in from at the beginning of your upkeep. If you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. General rule of thumb is most players will not let your dragon stay alive to trigger that ability. However, if you can protect it, or if you can protect all your artifacts, then it's a way you can win the game out of nowhere. And not the bad kind of out of nowhere, just while people were looking at other things, you kind of got there. So, the last red card we're going to cover here is going to be Shattering Spree. Shattering Spree is another 1 red sorcery, destroy target artifact. However, it's got the ability Replicate. So for additional red, or when you cast the spell, you can copy it for each time you've paid its Replicate cost, and you may choose new targets. So if I pay Shattering Spree for red, and I Replicate with 3 red, blow up 4 artifacts. I just make them go away. So this is very similar to Vandalblast in terms of what it can do, but this is a lot more scalable. So if you only need to get rid of 3, well, you know there's no need to pay the 5 mana for a Vandalblast to do this job. You pay 3 mana and get your Shattering Spree to do the job instead. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. You get that flexibility here with this one versus the other one, while flexible, is just not quite as flexible. Instead, you get the security of, hey, I'm hitting everything for 5. So, but that said, that's been our red cards, top 20, under $10 that I recommend picking up. Again, if there's any other cards you think we need to be aware of in these colors under that price range, let us know in the description below. Main thing we're looking at here is just really trying to make cards affordable and trying to find different ways we can go in. There's no need to buy the $300 Wheel of Fortune when you can pick up a $4 Wheel of Misfortune, for example. So that's just kind of the train of thought we're working with here. Like I said, I've been fortunate enough in the past to have owned Reserve List. I was forced to move out of it, unfortunately, but I did used to own it. I actually used to own a full playset of duels that I played with. So, you know, while we can't always have everything perfect here for us, what we can do is we can try to make the best of what we have. And so these are just a couple of ideas on how we can do that. But anyway, this has been Z. Take care, stay safe, and have a good one.